নামি একাকার এত ভিন্ন নাহি আর, যে গুরু সে রাম নাম লহো নামি একাকার এত ভিন্ন নাহি আর, যে গুরু সে রাম নাম লহো অনন্ত অনন্ত লোকে অনন্ত অনন্ত লোকে দিবানিশে ধরেছে রণিছে নিত্য শুদ্ধ সব গুরু নাম। অনন্ত অনন্ত লোকে দিবানিশে ধরেছে রণিছে নিত্য শুদ্ধ সব গুরু নাম। গুরু কৃষ্ণ গুরু রাম গুরু নাম প্রাণানাম, ওই নামে মিলিবে নিত্য ধাম রে। ভাগবত জানো পরম নিরঞ্জন, ভাব ভয় ভঞ্জন নাম রে। করিয়া হৃদয় গৌর আনন্দ ঘন, পরম সুখদ গুরু নাম রে। জানো পরম পাখি তুই ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক রে, রাম কৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে। পাখি তুই ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক রে, রাম কৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে। তোর পিঠা উড়া নড়াচড়া ফুল পাবে ফুলে, তোর পিঠা উড়া নড়াচড়া ফুল পাবে ফুলে। ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক রে, রাম কৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে। পাখি তুই ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক, ঠিক বসে থাক রে, রাম কৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে। তুই যেদিকে যাবি দেখতে পাবি চল জলাকার, আর নাই কো অন্ত দিক দিগন্ত অপার পাথর। তুই যেদিকে যাবি দেখতে পাবি চল জলাকার, আর নাই কো অন্ত দিক দিগন্ত অপার পাথর। তোর ধরবে টানা তোর চেতনা করবে মহা মুশকিল, তোর ধরবে টানা পাখি তোর ধরবে টানা ধরে চেতনা পড়বে গঙ্গা মুশকিলে ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক রে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে ওরে এদিকে অবিদ্যা মায়া পিশাচি করল আর বাকি আছে রূপ রসের মন মোহিনী জাল ওরে এদিকে অবিদ্যা মায়া পিশাচি করল আর বাকি আছে রূপ রসের মন মোহিনী জাল তুই পড়বি ফাঁদে পড়বি কেঁদে প্রাণ হারাবি শেষকালে তুই পড়বি ফাঁদে পাখি তুই পড়বি ফাঁদে পড়বি কেঁদে প্রাণ হারাবি শেষকালে ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক রে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে ওরে অনন্ত অনন্ত জীবন অন্তকে করে আর প্রধান গ্রন্থ বেদ বেদান্ত জ্ঞান চুপ মেরে ওরে অনন্ত অনন্ত জীবন অন্তকে করে আর প্রধান গ্রন্থ বেদ বেদান্ত জ্ঞান চুপ মেরে আর পুরাণেরা দিশাহারা সার পেল না শেষকালে আর পুরাণেরা দিশাহারা সার পেল না শেষকালে ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক রে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে তোর বৃথাওরা নাড়াচাড়া ফুল পাবিনি অকুলে ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক ঠিক বসে থাক রে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে রামকৃষ্ণ নামে মাস্তুলে
Yeah, whenever you.
Namaskar everyone. Swami Atmajnanananda and Swami Bhaswatananda is with us. We are very glad that you are here. We will begin our Sunday spiritual talk by Swami Atmajnananda now. It will be followed by question answer after about 45 minutes. And it will continue for another half an hour following that. Then we will have lunch packets served by devotees. Please collect the lunch packets before you leave. And we have the new website showing the upcoming events. Kindly follow that and participate. Thank you for your participation. Pranams to Swamiji, and I hope we can get some advice and blessings from Thakur today. Thank you. Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupene Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha. Good morning, everyone. This morning I thought that I would speak a little bit about bhakti. I asked Madhuraki D, what should I talk about today? She said, I always like to hear about bhakti. And to be honest, sometimes we get a little bit Vedanta, Jnana Yoga heavy in our lectures and everything, and we miss a little bit of that devotional side. In our tradition, we really have a beautiful blend and balance. We hear the phrase sometimes, Jnana Misra Bhakti, to describe Thakur's teachings, that it'll be a blend, that there'll be equal weight given to the devotional side and to the philosophical side. And of course, meditation will be there, and then service. But in terms of the actual sadhana and the spiritual view of things, it'll be a blend. The Mishra doesn't mean mixed up. It means that nicely harmonized. So we find that even when Thakur talks about bhakti, it's different from traditional bhakti teachers. If we look at the tradition in India, we find that most of the bhakti teachers had some type of dualistic philosophical grounding to them. Even when we talk about this Vishishta Dvaitavada, this is also a kind of dualistic tradition, because there'll be some distinction between the Jivatman and Paramatman, some real distinction. It won't be something that will disappear at the time of liberation or anything. Thakur himself wasn't the first and only one to really blend Advaita Vedanta and this Bhakti Yoga, but there was something special about the way that he did it. And when we talk about Thakur's Vedanta, he was comfortable with every school of Vedanta. I mentioned yesterday there's a difference between the acharyas and these different saintly figures that we have in the, not just Indian tradition, every religious tradition will have that. We'll have Sufi traditions, we'll have mystical Christian traditions and everything. We'll find that these great mystics, they don't quarrel about a doctrine too much. They go beyond all of that. So for Sri Ramakrishna, every philosophical position was a model. It wasn't a final truth. His understanding of truth was completely different. This truth is not found in any doctrine. Swamiji understood that perfectly. He made so many beautiful statements about that you won't find this ultimate truth in churches and temples and doctrines and anything. It'll be through direct experience. But Sri Ramakrishna gave us a type of model where we can have a deep appreciation for Advaita Vedanta without losing this ability to have a devotional relationship with God, with a personal God. And he explains it in so many different ways. I think the easiest one is when he talks about this stick of ego. This ego, whether it's real or not, is a different question. The point is that we experience it. We may say that ultimately it has no substance to it. That's for the philosopher. For us, whether it's real or unreal, it's present. And rarely will that leave us. So he says that it's like a stick that is lying on the surface of water. Because of that, we feel some separation. Now, there's no real separation. But this is the difference between what we'll call some metaphysical truth and what we can say is experiential reality. Experientially, we feel this sense of I, we feel a sense of identification with the body, so we feel some type of separation. So he says, utilize that and take that I and form a relationship with God. Or if we say that we feel that we're like a wave on the ocean, the wave
from one point of view, is not different from the ocean. It's the same water, same substance. When the wave subsides, we realize it had no ultimate reality to it. It was a name and form. But as long as the wave exists, then this wave can feel a sense of reverence for the entire ocean and feel oneness with it, but also some sense of distinction. So we can understand this oneness, let that form the ground and the basis for a devotional attitude by understanding the role that this ego plays, ego sense. It's not a real thing, but we can't get rid of it. This is why Thakur identifies the ego with Maya. It has no ultimate reality. When we analyze the ego, what is it? It's just an idea. If you ask me what I think of myself, how do I describe myself? That's the ego. It's just an image. It's who I think that I am, and it may be accurate, it may be completely inaccurate, but whatever, that's the ego. So Thakur says, utilize that. This is that concept of Vidyamaya, that real or unreal, let it be helpful. So Thakur gives great emphasis to this path of devotion. Bhakti Sar, he says in many places that this is the essential thing. And the path of knowledge, Thakur really felt that very few are qualified. Again, this adhikara idea. Very few are qualified to strictly follow Advaita Vedanta. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't accept the teachings and the truth of it, but we keep it in our pocket. This was a very nice teaching that he had. Don't discard it. That'll be the ultimate truth. Everything leads to oneness. But how do we do our spiritual practice? This is a big question. See, the path of knowledge and the path of devotion have one very big distinction. And that is that the path of devotion, we can start with our present understanding of things. We can say that, yes, I am this body. We can say, yes, this ego is real. We can not question. We don't have to question any of these things. We start with that understanding, and we form a relationship with God. And as we go higher and higher, that Swamiji says, it's like this bhakti, love is like a rope. It draws us closer and closer to God. That distinction becomes less and less. We start to feel that we really belong to God. Then we start to feel that we're one, that we're part of God, and then some union takes place. And when we get to the top of the roof, then no distinction at all. This can also happen. The worshippers of the Divine Mother, they can also say, Saham, I am she. Very rarely will they do it, and very rarely will they want to do it. But the point is, they don't deny that ultimately everything can lead to oneness. This Thakur's a great teaching, by the way. So, with this path of devotion, Thakur gives us beautiful models, some way to understand it. If we say that we're real devotees of Advaita Vedanta, we like this idea of Vedanta, where's the scope for worship of a personal God? The big question. I remember Swami Lokeshwaranandaji, he spoke in Hollywood once, and he started his talk with a very shocking statement. He said, there's no personal God in Vedanta. Straightforward. There's no personal God in Vedanta. What he meant was, if we go back to the Upanishads themselves, see, the whole Indian tradition is very curious. In the very early days, Vedic period, there is some devotional attitude and worship, of course, yajna and everything, to all the different deities and everything. By the time we get to the Upanishads, the emphasis is on this impersonal absolute reality. We don't find any real scope for bhakti in the Upanishads. The germ of it is there. Swamiji's belief was that everything that developed later, Avatara, all of these other things, the germ is there in the Upanishads. But really the emphasis is on impersonal absolute and Tattvamasi. This where's the scope for worship when the Jivatman and Paramatman are one? Where's that scope for worship? This becomes a big issue, and We even read discussions that took place between Swamiji, Narendra at that time, and Kali, Swami Atmajnananda, and who is his personal God? I alone exist. And Swamiji, of course, will confuse us. He'll say, yeah, we look for that personal God, and we find it's our very own self that we're praying to. So we can get confused. Very own self for Swamiji, of course, is not this ego sense. That very own self will be also one with the infinite absolute Brahman. But still, how do we personalize the impersonal absolute? Now, if we ask this question of Sri Ramakrishna, he'll laugh at us because the personal God was 100% real to him. No one could even raise that issue with him. The Divine Mother was 100% real. She spoke to him. She guided him. She provided the words for him, everything. For us, we don't have that experience. So this doubt may come that if we're followers of Vedanta, we like the Upanishadic ideal, the Brahman is impersonal absolute, where's the scope for devotion? Now, Sri Ramakrishna will give us so many beautiful illustrations and ways of understanding this. One is a very nice example of we take the ocean, and we know that in very cold regions of the ocean that it'll form blocks of ice. We'll have these icebergs floating and everything. So he says through the Him Shakti, our power of devotion, is like a cooling power that can take that infinite ocean of consciousness and let it form into a block of ice. And that block of ice will be that aspect of God or that personality or name and form, whatever that we like, that we choose. This is the whole concept of Ishta Devata. So from that point of view, there's something subjective to it. We ourselves are projecting a certain image and understanding of the personal God on that infinite absolute reality, which will never be absolute. And it's not supposed to be. This is the beauty of the concept of Ishtadevata, that each and every one of us can have our own concept of God, our own understanding, to worship God in a particular form, either as mother, as father, any of the relationships, any of the beautiful concepts that we read about in the Puranas and the Gita, all the different scriptures and everything. We have a certain choice with regard to that. Now, some people will say, well, it's just our imagination. It may be the part of it is imagination, but the substance is real. The block of ice is that ocean. It's not separate from that ocean. The formation of it and the name and the form and the personality that we give to it allow us to access the ocean, which we otherwise can't do. How do we form a relationship with that? I'll give another example that Thakur uses. This example is normally understood to mean the harmony of religions. He talks about there's one pond. We all know this, a very common illustration. There's one pond and there are different gods. These are places where people can walk down and they can take a container and fill it with water and then they can go back. And he says that in this particular village, there are different communities. They all have their different bathing god, different steps that they can go down to, and they'll use different terms. One will say jal. Hindus will say jal. They'll have a pitcher. They'll fill it with the pitcher, and they'll take it with them. Christians will say water. They'll have a bucket. The Muslims will say pani, and they'll have some type of goat skin or something. They have a pouch that they'll use. So everyone will have a different way of doing it, but the substance is the same. So this is the point that he's making. Now, we can look at this also in terms of the Ishtadevata. Another way of looking at this illustration, that each and every one of us is taking that water, that Satchidananda, this ocean of infinite absolute reality. And if we want to fetch the water, it has to come in a container with a name and with a form. And this goes back. This is why I like this idea of order. Thakur was once asked, what is Brahman like? Now, what was his standard answer? No one can say what Brahman is like. But on one particular occasion, he said to M, he hesitated, and then he said, it's like water. Now, what are the qualities of water? Water has a very curious quality that it's formless and yet always has a form. It has no form of its own, but it's never found in a formless state. It'll always take a form. If you put it in a pitcher, it takes the form of the pitcher. You say, well, what about the ocean? It's a form. It's flat on top, and it takes the shape of the ocean bed. So if we want to access this with water, it'll have to take the form of the container. Now, what is that container? It's the human heart. How do we want to see God? Now, we can say that this is not, there's no ultimate truth to this. Again, this falls a little bit within that idea of Vidyamaya. It's not absolutely true. If it were true, then my conception of God would be right and yours would be wrong. If my picture, it says mother, God is mother. And somebody else says, but my picture, it takes a different shape. God is father. I say, no, you're wrong and I'm right. But it's not like that, because each and every form and the substance is the same. Both do act. Thakur used to say the substance is the same. We're all getting that same water. Now, what about the Advaitin? The Advaitin simply dives in the pond. If the Advaita, if anybody wants to take that water, that means some separation. It has to have a form, and we can give it a name. It has to. But the Advaitin is, well, just dive into it. You remember that question that Thakur asked Narendra one time. He said, imagine that you're a fly, and there's a big bowl of syrup, and you want to drink that syrup. What will you do? So Narendra said that I'll land on the rim of that cup, and I'll bend over, reach down, and I'll drink it. So Thakur said, well, why not simply fly into it? He said that I'll drown if I fly into it. And he said, no, my child, this is the nectar amrita, that will become immortal. So the Advaitin, this doesn't deny the truth of Advaita Vedanta. It doesn't deny a type of sadhana for the jnani. But they won't have to have this feeling of separation. They don't have to have a name and form. They can simply dive into it. Now, I was talking about this main difference between the two paths. This is that difference for the jnani. They start at the end. The bhakta, he starts with this feeling of separation and everything. And each step gets closer and closer, and this feeling of oneness comes more and more. But the jnani has to start with this aham brahmasmi. They start at the end, and they have to make up the difference in the middle somehow. So it's very difficult. And among Thakur's direct disciples, how many of them did he encourage to follow the strict path of jnana yoga? Swamiji, to a certain extent, but even for Swamiji, he said, look at his eyes. He has the eyes of a bhakta, of a devotee. That he knew that Swamiji had that tender heart, that loving heart. But he encouraged him because he had been influenced by the Brahmo Samaj and everything. He encouraged him to have this Advaitic understanding. But even for most of the other direct disciples, he felt that the path of devotion was best. And we read in Gita that the path of knowledge and the path of devotion are both good. You read the beginning of chapter 12 of Gita, they're both good. So what's the difference? There's the path of knowledge. It's more difficult because it goes against every fiber of our being. I am this physical presence that you see here. I am that. How can I say I'm that infinite absolute reality without laughing at myself? Philosophically, I understand it. But I have to start out, and that means that I can't have any attachment to anything. That I have to have intense vairagya. To be a jnani, it really requires intense dispassion, not feeling any connection with. This is why it was early days, it was really meant for the sannyasis, and the sannyasis that would go and live in a cave or just not keep company with anything, divorce themselves from society completely. It was meant for them specifically. Now, why do we teach it? Why did Swamiji teach it so much? Because it can form the ground and basis for this higher type of bhakti. That wasn't the only reason, of course. It leads to this very liberal idea that we're all striving to realize the same reality. There are many reasons to understand it. But I don't think that the Swamiji ever felt that each and every individual can follow the strict harsh path of Jnana Yoga exclusively. Even in our order, we have very few examples. We had our Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj was famous. Now, for him, following Jnana Yoga meant that no going into the temple even and bowing down before Thakur's image. We heard, I only met him a few times, but we heard that on special occasions he would go into the temple just to see the decorations. Okay, maybe we can do this or something. But other than that, everything was Brahman, real Jnani. We had a few at Dhireshana, we had a few among that, but generally in our order, we try to blend these two. So we can start with this idea that ultimate reality is this impersonal absolute, and we can have this idea that we're one with that, or at least part of that, but we're also a wave, and this wave can form a relationship with the ocean. And we accept this idea that we utilize the imagination, that there's no harm in that. There's no harm in that. It becomes an aid. It becomes helpful to us. Now, if we think about human relationships, do we not project things onto other people? How much do we know of other people? We see by their behavior. We think we know them. How many times we see, unfortunately, even in marriages, that something goes wrong, and the husband or wife says to the other, "I thought I knew you. Now you're like a complete stranger. And I thought I understood everything, and now I see nothing." So how much can we understand of this idea of personal God? So this idea of the personal God involves a little bit of projection, but everything does. So we have so many different paradigms, and these paradigms involve something called this Panchabhava idea. Now, Thakur, he gave great emphasis to this idea. Ekta bhav aswai kota habe. This forms the ground and basis for devotional life, that we form a relationship with God. Now, in the Vaishnava tradition, there are 5 relationships. And we can add to that for the Shaktas, they'll have this Shantan Bhav, look at God as Divine Mother. Otherwise, in the Vaishnava tradition, the first one, the Shanta Bhava, they don't give too much importance to it. It's really 4 very important ones. We can feel that we're a servant of God, and we have the paradigm. Each one has the paradigm. And a very nice feature of this tradition is that in the beginning, say the paradigm is Hanuman, and the way Hanuman feels himself to be the servant of Rama. In the beginning, whole mind is not focused on Rama, it's focused on Hanuman. This is that Arop Kora, another concept that Thakur had, that we have to assume an identity, that we have to identify. So we identify with Hanuman in order to feel the devotion that Hanuman had for Rama. Then we can worship Rama. So we look at Thakur's life. He became so identified with Hanuman, that he himself said even a little tailbone grew a little bit, an inch or something. So don't laugh, these things are possible. The body and the mind are so interrelated and connected that it's not impossible that something like that can happen. Anyhow, at the very least, he used to tie his cloth in such a way that it looked like a tail was hanging down, and he would jump from place to place, and he would eat fruit, bananas, and things like that, and fully became identified So this is part of that. If we take the Vatsalya Bhava, then Yashoda is the paradigm. So we try to feel that love that Yashoda had for the baby Krishna. And if we can identify enough with that, with the Yashoda, then we can really have that type of loving relationship. So everything is a relationship. So we have Dasya Bhava, Vatsalya Bhava, Sakya Bhava. So we can feel that one of the friends of Krishna, these are all Vaishnava things, the friends of Krishna, as when they're all grazing cows together, they have nothing else to do. Cows are all there, so they play with each other. They sit on each other's shoulders. They eat off the same plate. That little intimate relationship. What was Swamiji's relationship with Sri Ramakrishna? What bhava? Huh? Anybody want to take a guess? We can say father and son. We don't know exactly, and Swamiji had so many.
It's described in Khandana Bhava.
Yeah. Anyhow, Swamiji had so many different moods and attitudes, so there's not one simple thing. But we have one beautiful incident. This took place, I don't remember, but one of the early, I don't remember which one it was, but Swamiji said one day, I'll do puja. And so there's a tradition that at the time of the food offering, that other people leave. And it's just the pujari doing the food offering. So from outside, they could hear Swamiji say, talking to Sri Ramakrishna, come, my friend. Yeah. Now, who else can do that? And most of the time, probably, Thakur was of course, with everything to Swamiji. But he could probably alone, of all the direct disciples, he alone could have that attitude, at least at that time. He had that attitude. It's a beautiful incident to think about.
I haven't heard it before.
Yeah. Banglaiki Shoki. What did he say? I don't remember exactly. But something like that. And I may have read it in the English translation also. Come, my friend. And it's written in some of the biographies. So we have these different bhavas, and the theory is that there's a hierarchy. So we have this first, the Shanta Bhava. This will be more the ancient rishis and this more impersonal relationship, something like the Brahmas, we might say. And then we have the Dasya Bhava. Then each succeeding one, Sakya Bhava, will include the lower one. So friends also will feel it, have some feeling of liking to serve their other friends. So that'll be there. And then the Vatsalya Bhava. And then we also want to serve. We also want to have this friendly relationship, and then also look upon the child with a great love and devotion. So a Madhura Bhava is considered the highest because it includes all of them. And this is, of course, that relationship between Radha and Krishna. This is the main paradigm. So Thakur practiced all of these. Swami Sharadananda is very clear in his Great Master that we don't know too much about how Thakur practiced Sakya Bhava and everything, but he says that Thakur practiced all of them. And of course, realized the truth of all of them, realized that the highest, for him, highest realization meant some merging. In almost every instance, the object of his worship would enter into him. This was a very common thing for him, even with his Islamic sadhana, that he'll feel everything will end in some type of oneness. This looking at the picture of Christ, that light comes and enters into him. So some type of oneness was there. So he practiced all of these different bhavas, and for him, the main one. So my point is that these aren't exclusive. These are 5 that the Vaishnava system talks about. But the Shantan Bhava, this looking upon God as mother, so it could be God as father, but there can be all different types of attitudes. So this one was the one that seemed to be the default attitude. After Thakur practiced all of the others, as soon as it was over, he would go back to that. That seemed to be the one that was dearest to his heart and most natural to him, which is interesting because he came from the Vaishnava family, and not The Vaishnava family worshippers of Rama, not the typical Gauranga, Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition of Bengal, but they were worshippers of Raghuveer. So when he practiced Vatsalya Bhava, it was a little bit different. It was with Ram Lala, with the baby Rama, not baby Krishna. But all of these, some teacher came. So not that he chose these things, he had a desire for it, and the teacher would come, and the guru would come, and then he would practice all of these things. So this is one way to establish a relationship, to personalize God, a little bit of personalizing God. So the little subjectivity is here. Now the other side of it, the other way to look at it, is that God himself is revealing himself to us in the form that we want to see. So there's something objective about it. These are two different ways of looking at it. In Gita, we find a little bit of both. That God will reveal himself in the form that we most want to see. So there's a little mixture of objectivity, subjectivity, but the essence is real. The essence is real. Now, what about the devotee who really feels deep down that this idea of personal God is too much my imagination? I like this idea, God is infinite, absolute reality. This idea of Bhagavan, how does this Bhagavan come? And we have our Brahman, we have our Ishvara, we have all of these things from the Upanishads. Somehow the Bhagavan slipped in. When we read Gita, sometimes we hear that Gita represents the essence of all of Veda Vedanta. That is the Sara, the essence of all the teaching. But it adds so many new things. It adds this Karma Yoga. It adds this Avatar Vada. There's so much of Sankhya and Yoga are there. It's so it brings a lot of new things also. So somehow after the Upanishadic period, we get this period of devotional worship and personal God. We can say the modern Hindu tradition starts. See, there's a very clean break. It may have taken some hundreds of years or something, but between the Vedic period and the modern period. So no more yajna and puja. It gets replaced a little bit, and somehow this worship of the personal God becomes prevalent. We don't question it too much, where it really wasn't there in the Upanishadic period. So some people may think that, no, I'm really a jnani, that this idea of personal God doesn't make too much sense to me, that I feel like I'm fooling myself. Praying, who am I praying to? Praying to my own higher self? They may feel like that. So what is the scope for them? Now, we come to a very interesting thing. Here's one case where I disagree a little bit with Sri Ramakrishna. Yeah. He says the avatar is not for the jnani, it's for the bhakta. I think the avatar is for the jnani, and I'll explain why. There's a understanding of this avatar that's a Puranic understanding. And from Gita also, this avatar of the personal God has to be there and has to descend to earth. But there's another way of understanding it. And there's a very nice explanation, historical explanation, that we find in the introduction to the Great Master, the Leela Prasanga, with Swami Sharadananda. He talks about how this early Sankhya idea of this Adhikarika Purusha, that there were certain individuals who had some special power, and these were the ones that had that ability. We call them Nitya Siddhas and everything, to even though they attain a state of perfection, that they can be born again. They can choose to be born again. We discussed this recently with this idea of the Bodhisattva and everything, that this is what developed into this idea of the avatar. So we, for the jnani, can easily say that I'm a small wave on this ocean of Satchidananda, and there's a huge wave that comes every once in a while that we feel such reverence for that we have no choice but to bow down before them and worship them. And seeing that wave, we understand the power and strength of the ocean. Every other wave, we only understand the limitations and restrictions, seeing that. So Thakur gave us also this understanding of the avatar, that it's like looking through a hole in the wall where we see the endless infinite meadow on the other side. So we have this idea that the avatar doesn't have to be that Narayan is in heaven, he sees some problem on earth, he says, let me go down. We don't have to have that type of understanding. That from time to time, these special souls are born, either out of historical necessity. This is the Gita idea, right? That somehow Dharma is in trouble, so there's some historical necessity that they'll be born, or out of their own will, or just from time to time. We don't have to come to any conclusion about these things, but that they come from time to time. And why do they come? We have the very traditional Gita idea for the sake of Dharma. And we have this other idea Thakur talks about, and the more devotional idea. They come to teach devotion. They come to be a living example. They come to give us conviction that these things we read about in the scriptures are true. So when we look at the life of Sri Ramakrishna, and we see that everything that he did was to verify he was the pramana, verify the truths of the different spiritual paths. Everything we read about that we wonder, well, can God be realized through this path and this path, all of these things, that he did it. And he is a living proof of all of these things. So we have this idea of the avatar, and Swamiji makes another brilliant statement, a very beautiful idea. He said, if we like this idea of personal God, and he says, what is your conception of the personal God? Your conception is some great being who has tremendous mercy and compassion and love. And then he says, what is your understanding of mercy, compassion, and love? How restricted and how limited it is. When these souls are born, we see an example of love and compassion and everything, far greater than we can imagine if we try to imagine the greatest amount. Because it's limited by our own understanding. All of our love has some selfishness to it. This is why so many traditions that they worship a God who's also a jealous God like us, who also likes us better than our enemies, all of that, because limited by our own understanding of things. And right before us, we see the living presence of these great souls. And Sri Ramakrishna, whenever I talk about Sri Ramakrishna, I mean Holy Mother also. I don't make any distinction. They came together, two sides of the same coin. They came, and we see right before us these in human flesh, the example of the type of love that we can't even imagine. We can't imagine the type of love that Thakur felt for Narendra and some of the other young disciples born later and others, unimaginable. You remember that one time that Narendra, he scolded Sri Ramakrishna because after his father had died, that the family was in great need. They didn't have enough money even to put food on the table. They're practically starving. And Narendra is going from place to place trying to find some job, and he couldn't find anything. So Thakur would talk to the devotees sometimes and say, can't you help out a little bit? So Narendra became very embarrassed, and he scolded Sri Ramakrishna. He said, why do you talk about this, my or family condition before everybody like that? And then Thakur said, don't you know, for your sake, I would beg from door to door. Now, can we imagine that? Huh? This man is practically 50 years old, this young boy, and that type of love, can we imagine? It's greater than the highest imagination of love that we can do. So this is that advantage of the avatar. Now, Sri Ramakrishna also gave us so many ways of recognizing the avatar. He spoke about this many times, and some of them are a little surprising. One is how human they are. He said, Avatar is born with a human body and a human mind and human emotions. We sometimes wonder how much attachment that Thakur had how much attachment Holy Mother had. She hardly knows somebody and they leave and she's weeping and crying. Huh? But this was their human heart, and there was no self within it. There was no ego. It was completely selfless love. So this is one thing, and Thakur always said, don't forget that Rama wept for Sita. So this humanness, this is a part of it. This tremendous ability to do spiritual practice that what Thakur underwent is we wonder why this is a perfect human being, Nitya Siddha, whether we say avatar or not, why did he have to go through all of these severe sadhanas and so much rolling on the ground, his face bleeding, calling him mother, mother, mother? He said for 6 years that sleep, I hardly ate anything and sleep left me completely. But it's hard to imagine. Why did he have to undergo all of that? The avatar has that ability. No human being can do that. Ordinary human being can undergo that type of spiritual practice, can have such realization, such a bhava. This is two things that go along with this. One is bhava, and the other samadhi. That the avatar alone can experience that type of spiritual ecstasy without completely shattering the body. Thakur talks about an elephant going into a small hut. This is we get a little bit of bhava and we become overwhelmed. There's a nice incident that took place in Kashipur. That Thakur had given Swamiji some Ram mantra, and he was repeating that, and he got so elated and excited. He started practically running around, and in such a high state. Thakur left. He said, "Look at this state that he's in. I was in that state for 12 long years. I didn't make a big fuss like that." So even the difference between Swamiji, who was among all the direct disciples, he was that huge container. The avatar is completely different. Completely different. We can't compare any of the direct disciples to Swamiji and Holy Mother. This idea of this adhar, that containers. So this avatar, Thakur and Mother, they were such huge containers that they could withstand the highest type of emotion and ecstasy and everything. When Swamiji went to Amarnath, he had such an intense experience and realization that his health was really shattered after that. They say the heart was enlarged, he had blood clot in one eye, even physical things happened. So even physically, Thakur had such a weak body, but somehow could withstand all of that ecstasy. So this is one thing. Then samadhi, who can come back, this nirvikalpa samadhi state, there's no way to come back down from it. There's no I there. We can't say, okay, now I've had enough, I'll come back down. So Thakur says either we still have some desires that will pull us down, or Divine Mother, or karma, something will pull us down. Otherwise, there's no way to come back from it. So very rare. And Thakur, every day he could have this samadhi. He lived in that state for first 3 straight days when the Totapodi was there, and then how many months after that, and it still could come back from that. So this ability to go back and forth to this bhavamukha state, to this samadhi and back, this ability to withstand the intensity of divine emotions. These will be 2 signs of the avatar. The ability to transfer spirituality. How Thakur, just by a glance, or just raise his hand, somebody's kundalini goes up. That ordinary people can't do these things. That so many stories. How that one time he with the Swami Vigyan Maharaj. We said, "Do you know wrestling?" Young boy, big, strong. Yes, I know wrestling, of course. So he's there wrestling, and he pins him against the wall. Then he feels something, some electric current or something, and Thakur is transferring this power to him that way. So that ability to transfer spirituality. How simply saying, Chaitanya Hok, Simply saying that. And maybe touching them. Sometimes he'll touch the chest, or he'll put his foot out and touch somebody innocently, and it can change the whole lifetime. How spiritual experience can come through all of that. Another interesting thing he says about the avatar is they're generally not recognized during their lifetime. The one incident where he's talking to Latu, and he says, Latu, let's make a list. Let's make a list of all the devotees. They came up with 30 something like that. Now, can you imagine? Today, when somebody shows up for 2 minutes, he's got 1 million followers. And this is the avatar. So he gives a nice illustration that if a boat is going along the Ganga, a small boat, they can go very near the shore. They don't have to worry about anything. They're not deep in the water. They can go near the shore, and a few waves will lap up on the shore from the wake of the boat. He says a big steamship has to go in the middle of the river. It can't go too close to the edge. By the time the waves come, they're huge. They can break off big pieces of land. By the time they come, the ship is out of sight. So he says, Baul Dol, that he came, these bowels, if you've ever seen, sometimes they'll simply show up out of nowhere. They'll sing and dance, they'll play their instruments and everything, and then next thing you know, they're gone. They're beautiful illustrations. Beautiful. How Thakur came, he played his Leela on earth for a few minutes, few days, and then he's gone, and everyone is thinking, wow, what happened? Who was that who came? How was it possible that we were laughing and joking with him and everything? And so this is the avatar. So this is something even the Jnani who thinks this idea of personal God is just my own imagination, that here we have living human flesh, and in the case of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, we have their photographs. We have their direct words. We have everything there. That can be the object of our meditation and of our love. Somebody can say, how do you love somebody you've never met? What I said in the very beginning, even people we meet, half the time we don't know them. We think we know them. But it happens that, first of all, we have a direct connection. We have a direct connection through this tradition that we have, through the line of the Gurus, parampara, and everything. And the more we immerse our minds in the Leela, the more we read from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna and the Gospel of Holy Mother and everything, the more we go there, we visit the places where they lived and everything, they become real to us. We start to feel the living presence. And through meditation, we start to feel they dwell within us. But to actually go and see the physical signs that they existed, it makes a difference. These physical things, they play a very important emotional role for us. Physical things. We have a gospel class. Recently, we read this one section when Em is with Ramakrishna during that Christmas break. And they're walking along the road, and there was a large branch that fell from a tree. And Thakur happens to mention to Em that this branch, this was on the tree, I used to sit under this for meditation with Maturati. And Em says, yes, I know, sir. And then a little sheepishly, Em says, I've kept a little twig from this, and I keep it in my room. And Thakur says, why? He says, I feel happy when I look at it. And then he says, one day this place will be a great place of pilgrimage. So Thakur says, like Panihati. Which of course is nothing compared to Dakshineshwar now. So it's very nice. Thakur used to say, you go to some place of pilgrimage, bring back a little thing. There's a very nice remembrance of things like that. So it becomes very real to us. And we don't have to imagine that, because they actually existed. I had a very nice experience on an early trip to India. Before the museum, most of the things that Thakur and Mother, the things that they'd used, are kept upstairs in the above the main temple, in the Bhagavan. So I was up there, I was, yes, a young brahmachari, not so young, but brahmachari. And they were showing me everything. There's a bed and the different things like that. And I see these two wooden asanas, something like this, the top of this. And immediately I knew that this is where Thakur sat and Mother sat for the Shodashi Puja. And I thought, oh, Baba. And I started to shake almost, because you start to realize that this is nobody's imagination. They actually lived. It's hard to conceive that they actually lived, these two great souls. How is it possible in the human body like that? So we want to develop love for Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, is going there, seeing these things, let it become real to us, and let the mind become immersed in this reading of all of this type of literature. The gospel, of course, is the best. Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and so many other things, the lives of the direct disciples, they become real to us. They become like a family to us, and we find somehow that some miracle comes, and we really feel that we love them more than we love our own relatives and our own near and dear. It happens. It happens. And people say, "Oh, you've never seen them." Doesn't matter. It happens. So this is that path of devotion that can really enrich our lives. This path of knowledge, Thakur always said, is a little bit dry. Now, for some people, of course, it's not dry at all. Some people, they get great joy. They think, the self, great joy. There's no question about that. But for most of us, if we can utilize the emotions, see, the beauty of this Panchabhava doctrine is that we know what it means to love a child. We know what it means to love a mother. We know that. We simply have to transfer that love. So it's something that already belongs to us. We have that power, so we can utilize that. So it allows us a beautiful synthesis, head and heart. That's what Swamiji used to say. That the ideal person would be the head of Shankaracharya and the heart of Buddha. If we can have that devotional side and that intellectual side and the meditative side and the service, that side, if we can have them all blended together, this will be the ideal. Ideal spiritual aspirant. This is Swamiji, with his idea of the 4 yogas, he really, the highest was to make it one yoga, not 4 separate things. Not that we practice all of them at different times, but it just becomes integrated. It becomes one spiritual path for us. So we can still have our Soham, and at the same time we have this avatar ideal to utilize that love within the heart. Because when we sit for meditation, if there's no love there, then it won't work. The mind is not strong enough. This is why Thakur always says, "This abhyasa is not enough. This vairagya is not enough. You have to have anuraga. There has to be some pull, some deep pull. For some, it may be there's a tremendous pull for truth. We have it. Buddha was like that. But for most of us, we need some emotional talk. So I'll stop here. I thought it would be nice to balance things a little bit, talk about the devotional path. Thank you. So questions, we were hoping people would write things down. Did anybody write anything down? Maharaj, please come. Now you have to join me.
Maharaj, glass of water?
No, I'm fine. Thank you. Huh? While we're waiting, I can add one thing, that this idea of the avatar and meditation and worship of the avatar, when we read this dhyana mantra, this dhyana mantra is brilliant, it's very beautiful. Swami Vedananda, that we see that the avatar is worshipped as the infinite absolute Brahman, as the Ishvara, as Saguna Brahman, as the Antaryaman, as our very own self, and as the historical figure, all one and the same, not separating any one to the other, a beautiful combination. And where? Hridaya Kamala Madhye, Rajitam Nirviho, dwelling within our very own hearts. The avatar exists. And we can really feel that this Leela that took place in the 1882, 83, 1845 in Dakshineshwar, that this is going on today. That there's some Nitya Leela that's taking place. And all we have to do is immerse the mind there, and we sit in meditation, we're there. We can have that experience. That's much. Tell them in front of everyone. Come on.
What I wanted to add was even when
Closer.
even hardcore Advaitins who wouldn't have anything to do with an incarnation of God, they only substitute the incarnation with their own gurus. They even say Nadvaitam Gurunasaha. Yes. So all the devotion that a bhakta shows to his chosen ideal, a practicing Advaita Vedantin will show his own guru.
You can add anything else also, anything occurred to you. So questions coming?
Okay. While
We can have questions from the audience, but one question per person.
could you please, it's hard to conceive Thakur, as an avatar, as a person, as also Mayadhish. He dwells in Maya, but he is also controlling of the Maya. That concept, I think it bridges both, but how do we assimilate in ourselves?
Okay,
This is
all right.
I would have all these things, the knowledge that I gather from the scriptures at the back of my mind, but when I am in front of Thakur face to face, I wouldn't be thinking of these things. I would only try to serve him as best as possible and leave the rest to him.
then we become bhakta.
Yes.
And I was trying to see some
From a mixture.
Advaita.
How I myself would do it is, these things would be in the background, but when I'm face to face with Thakur,
Thank you.
I wouldn't, as Maharaj said the other day, I wouldn't overanalyze these things all the time. I learn what I can from the books, but for the moment,
Thakur
will be in the background.
Thakur is Thakur.
Yes.
Yeah, my question is, Namaskar Maharaj, this is very excellent talk. My question is, how do we get grace? Without grace, nothing happens. Even our hard work, our devotion, our time spending, crying and yelling. How do we get the grace easily? And why the grace is not equally transmitted?
Yeah. Grace.
For a long time, I was under the impression that for grace to be called so, if grace has to be grace, it has to be unconditional. But after that, I talked about this with a few Swamis and Brahmacharis. And after that, they showed me a few instances in the gospel itself where Thakur is very clear about it. He says grace is something that has to be earned. Even grace has to be earned. You have to work hard. You have to deserve that grace. And that comes only from, prayer. Pray for his grace. Pray with tears in your eyes, Thakur says. It is only when the child is tired of his toys and yells after his mother that the mother comes running. Until then, God will allow us to busy ourselves with this world.
But then the question comes, why somebody gets it and some people
It only appears like that. You remember this story of the hunter and the tantric in the forest. You remember that story?
Tell the story.
I may not be able to reproduce it
No,
exactly.
it's okay.
but,
It's okay.
There was a hunter who used to be busy in the forest, and one night he happens to come across a tantric worshipping the Divine Mother. All this sitting on the Shavasadhana and all. And yes, every day he's going about his spiritual practice every night, and the hunter is watching everything. And after that, after some time, the hunter has no idea of spiritual life. He thought, wow, what is this tantric doing here at dead of night? Let me try it. And then he ventures to this shavasana, this corpse, and then he sits on it, and mother appears before him. And it surprises the hunter, and he asks, "Mother, I was not expecting this. I had no idea of all this, but still you appeared to me, who has no idea of spiritual life, and deny this experience to the tantric who wants to see you, who has taken all this trouble." Then mother says, you have done all this in your previous lives, only this much was remaining. So Ashokanandji also says, don't compare yourself with people who think you who you think you are far ahead of you in spiritual life. That means they have worked earlier. It only appears that
That's a good answer. Thank you.
that's what we are taken to.
Yeah, but I spoke the whole time. Come on, you're doing good.
Yeah, the microphone
Okay.
Oh, yeah, got it.
is
It's okay. We have two photographs of Thakur at home. What is the proper way to look at home shrine? I don't understand exactly what you mean. The proper way to look, how the shrine should look, or
I had the question. We have one Thakur's photo in the shrine and one in another room.
Thakur in both
Same
of
photograph,
both of them the same picture.
two different pictures.
Uh-huh. Yeah, in most shrines, whether in temples or in homes, the picture of Thakur that is recommended for upasana is this.
So he has the same picture
Yes.
in two different places.
Yes.
Does he have to make offerings to both of them, or just to one, or what's the
No,
attitude
the
towards
question
them?
is what is the proper way to look at?
Yeah.
Like when we see the photograph, what thoughts do we have?
You can have any number of photographs of the same deity in different these things, but when you're talking about the shrine,
Yeah.
it is best if it is Thakur in this posture, because you have to have the same bhava every day, looking at the same image and imagining it inside.
What's the
Yeah,
second half of the question? The second half of the question.
Is there a morning and evening thought separate from each other? Is the mind pure in certain hours? Of course, they don't say the mind is pure at certain hours, the mind is calmer and more. It is easy for the mind to meditate during these twilight hours. That must be said. They don't. I haven't heard that the mind is purer at those times. Is there a morning or morning and evening thought? Usually, I've been also advised by more than one Swami to read the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita in the mornings, and read from Swamiji, read from the Gospel or from the teachings of direct disciples in the evening before going to bed. And if you can, of course, we live in ashrams, so it is always possible for us to read a page or two from Swamiji in the afternoon. This much I can say. If you have anything.
Some people may like this idea that in the morning time you're feeling that you're waking Thakur up, something like that. Depend. Everyone has a different, devotional attitude and mood towards things. But I think they're very personal things, and no one has to feel that they have to have this mood, this attitude. We all to try to have a very personal relationship with Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother. We read some of these letters of Swami Atmajnanananda, and we see that very often his relationship with Thakur was as Godai, as the young Thakur. That would be his feeling. We can look at this picture and still we can think of him as a young boy. We can look at the picture and think of him as infinite absolute reality. For most of us, at least for me, I see the picture, I think of the Dakshineswar years. Now, Kashipur also can be included, Shamtapur and everything, but that's what comes to my mind. And I've never made any real distinction between morning and evening for me, but it's a nice idea to think maybe in the morning.
To me, when I was Maharaj was talking about Jnana Mishra Bhakti, this combination that I was advised to follow, that helped me. To keep the Advaitic idea in the back, to keep the Vedantic idea in the background, and my worship or upasana of my chosen ideal in the foreground.
Yes, question in the back.
Maharaj, we see in the history, most of the avatars, they are coming as a human being. And they are, at that context, they are giving very good advice to the society. And then later on, because those advice are so authentic for the people or for the society, we ourselves make them as a Bhagavan or avatar. Then why don't we never try, all the same advice to some extent, all over that giving, make a uniform God so that so many problems in the society we can overcome. I don't see any people or any religious group, they put any interest to make it as a generic form of avatars. So all the avatars giving the same type of message time to time for the society.
It's not easy. We have this concept, Sri Ramakrishna talks about this concept of Yuga Avatar, that they come in the different time periods because there are different needs of society at different times. So during Thakur's time, there was much more mixing of cultures and everything, and classes of cultures. So this Jyotamot, Totobot, this harmony of religions became something important. He even went so far as to say that the coins from the Nawab period are of no value today. Yeah, he didn't mean it, so strongly, but his point was that the avatar also comes for a certain time period, and a certain culture and everything. So if we look at Christ at the time of his birth and everything, that we wonder why so much of curing and miracles and everything. These were appropriate for that time period, and you won't find. And it's a big mistake, I think, and this is something that, of course, many cultures do, but to try to get everyone to accept one incarnation as the one that everyone should accept. So just as there should be some freedom to think of personal God in the way that it appeals to us, there should be some freedom with regard to these great souls, these prophets, or these avatars, however we understand them. Because they'll appeal to different people. That Swamiji had this idea that each of the earlier avatars had one special teaching, that there would be some special emphasis on karma yoga or bhakti yoga, something like that. And one of the reasons why we feel Swamiji felt free to call Sri Ramakrishna Varishta, Avatar Varishta, is that he combined all of them. That so in our devotion, we may say he should be the one that everyone follows, that everyone will feel comfortable, but that's a bit of we have to be realistic and know that there'll be people who want the avatar from their culture and their language and everything. It's human nature. Did you add something?
Yeah, only one thing.
Okay.
He said all incarnations give more or less the same teaching. Not only giving out the teaching, but an incarnation's life is the teaching. So every incarnation shows by his life how we are to live in our times. So, and that cannot be made generic.
Yeah, that's good. The time is take my time.
Ranadi.
Who is going to be doing it until another avatar comes? For a human being, it's not possible to bring all
That's the whole point of an avatar.
Yeah,
Variety.
and we are not capable of making this one point, combining it. So, like a machhe jhol, ma made
Yeah,
in
exactly.
different ways.
Yeah.
Shukto
we
and
should
dal.
celebrate variety.
Yeah.
Celebrate variety,
Yeah.
and good stomach is
And
capable
appreciate
of-
the variety.
No,
Then we'll Devashish?
no, I was just asking if anyone has questions.
Then we can, so we end.
Pradeep কিছু বলবে? Pradeep has question.
Okay. Yeah.
Maharaj,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Huh.
Very good, very, obviously I'm speechless with your wonderful sermon. One question about Buddha
Yes.
and Buddhism. We know Swamiji was very fond of Buddha, very devoted to Buddha. What was Thakur's attitude to Buddha? And what kind of conversation did he have? We find a little bit here and there, but could you add a little bit more about Buddhism in Thakur's perspective?
Yeah, I'll say what I know. There's only one place in the gospel where Buddha's name comes up, and
Chapter.
all that we read there is what Buddha taught was not essentially different from Vedanta. Only Buddha could not express it adequately. Only this I can remember
Yeah.
from the gospel.
Yeah, there's, Swamiji went on pilgrimage to Bodh Gaya with Swami Shivananda and Swami Vedananda. I think the three of them. They went there, and when he came back, Thakur was very curious because we say Thakur practiced all of the religions known to him. This gives us a very clear indication that Buddhism was not well known in India. It had disappeared, more or less. It had disappeared, so he didn't know very much. So he asked lots of questions, and this question always came up: was he Gnostic? Gnostica, Astika? Was he? And his answer was that when Buddha said that this Shunyavada, that this idea of emptiness, and this Vedanta will say this Purna, this fullness. Thakur said there's ultimate realities in between Sat and Asat. And he said, why should we call the Buddha Gnostic? Even there was one conversation where Anne was talking about some Western philosophers, and he said something like, well, they believe in a great power. They may not believe it. Then Thakur said, that's enough. Then they're also Astika. They also have some belief. So Thakur really knew very little about life of Buddha. In India, he was known as one of the Dashavatars, and not so much else. Thakur, unless he had some direct contact, he had no way of knowing. Grew up in a village and everything, so he was very curious. But from what he heard from Narendra and the others, you could see that he had tremendous respect for him and felt that he was genuine and everything.
Thank you.
Maharaj, if no one has other questions,
Okay.
we will.
Do you want to do a final chant, closing chant?
Yes, sir. Closing chant and then
Yeah.
offering of flowers.
Okay, and yeah, he'll do a closing chant.
ॐ निरञ्जनं नित्यमनन्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पाधृतविग्रहं वै ईशावतारं परमेशमीड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामः.
And I think, you want us to offer some flowers?
Yes, Maharaj, if you offer the flowers and the Naivedya.
কুশন ছিল কুশন ছিল না ওই কুশন ছিল
Oh, अच्छा, yeah.
You have to tell from him what they have to sit fine. Because we have medicine from him. Everybody was trying to discuss it and
মহারাজ না বললে হবে না, আপনি বলবেন কেউ না, মহারাজ যদি বলেন তবে হবে।
proud of not to do the person, otherwise she would.
All of you can join and just I'll read small Thakur's book. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Vivekananda Jaya Shiva Jaya. Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Vivekananda Jaya Shiva Jaya. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Vivekananda Jaya Shiva Jaya. Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Vivekananda Jaya Shiva Jaya. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Sharada Majaya, Sharada Majaya, Paramamata Jaya Jaya Ma. Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Swami ji Jaya Shiva, Vivekananda Jaya Shiva Jaya. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Rama Krishna Jaya, Rama Krishna Jaya, Parama Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan Krishna Jaya Rama Krishna Jaya Hare Guru Jaya Jaya Bhagavan. Ramakrishna Sharma. Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Vipasitevalam, 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 Sharane. Prabhu Vipasitevalam, 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 Sharane. Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Sharanagatam, 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 Sharanam. Sharanagatam, 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 Sharanam. Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Shri Gurave, Namah Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna, Jaya Jaya Ramakrishna, 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 Ramakrishna, Ramakrishna. Jaya Jaya Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna. Jaya Jaya Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna. Jaya Jaya Rama Krishna, Rama Krishna Sharanam, Rama Krishna Sharanam, Rama Krishna Sharanam, Sharanam. Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Ramakrishna Sharanam, Sharanam.
Namaskar everyone. We are completing our Sunday lecture by Swami Atmajnananda now. And please feel free to ask any other personal questions to Swami when they are available. And also, please collect your lunch packets. They are available on the desk. And for people who have come to this center, please feel free to come anytime on Saturdays and Sundays. Check our website. And this is your center as much as ours, everyone's. Swamis come often, once a month at least in a formal basis. And we expect and hope at some point we'll have resident Swamis. Thank you for coming. And please take this Swami.
I heard. Which yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah, how are they? Very good. Right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, good. We tell them I said my love. How old are they? Wow. We'll see next year. Of course, all of our volunteers. Get fixed. The water breaks. Yes. Each lecture was, you didn't have to spend anything back. It's amazing.
বিশ্ব সংসারের ওই ওদের বাজেট ইন্ডিয়ান বাজেট তুমি অনলাইনে গুগল করে দাও আমি বলতে পারবো
তোমার এখানেও খেতে পারে আমার বড় একটা আমি দেখছি মানে
আপনি can you get back to 95?
I think GPS is there. थोड़ा I'll get ভালো ব্যাপার হচ্ছে নমস্কার ও নমস্কার Your son?
Yeah, they are today they are coming, but I will bring them for the next summer.
Yes. I'm text you. Text Thank you. I will connect you to না ওইটা তো ল্যান্ডলাইন আমি সেভ করতে পারছি
মাস্ক পরাতে কিছু পেন করতে না আমি চিনতে পারছি আপনি তো বলেছি তো খালি কথা এই যে চুলটা পাচ্ছি
অনেক দিন বাদে
চুল খালি
অনেক দিন বাদে
তারপরে শুনলাম তোমার কবি হয়েছে ওরা আসবে আর রান্না করবে না চুল খালি হয়েছে আচ্ছা আজকে আজকে বেশি সবাই আচ্ছা তোমার সিম্পটম আমার সিম্পটম জাস্ট
আমি আমার একটু আগে আমার ফুটটা নিয়ে আসি গাড়িতে এসেছি আমি অফ করে রাখি আমি তো অফ করে রাখি তোমার দিয়েছে খাবার দিয়েছে
Can you try this one? You're sitting here.
এটা কার বালিশ? রত্নারি মনে হয়।
এটা রত্নার।
আচ্ছা, ঠাকুরের বাসনগুলো না আমি জাস্ট ওখানে সাবান দিয়ে রিন্স করে এখানে রেখেছি। তুমি কি চাও যে আমি নিয়ে যাই বাড়িতে পরে ধুয়ে? আর তো তবু প্লিজ সুদেশনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করো কেন থাকে এই ব্যাপারটা। আমি কি বলছো? সুদেশনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করি না, ওর তো না না আমি জানি, আমাকে তো বলতে হবে না তো কাকে জিজ্ঞেস করো। ওকে জিজ্ঞেস করছি না, সে নেইও, আমার জিজ্ঞেস করে কাউকে কোনো দরকারই নেই। আমি বলছি আর তো আজকে লাগছে না, না আজকে লাগছে না, তাহলে আমি এগুলো নিয়ে চলে যাই। থ্যাংক ইউ। হ্যাঁ I just clap because I don't allow everybody. I will. Thank you. My pleasure. আমার মনে হয় না ঠিক মতো দিচ্ছে। আমি নিজে দেখছি কোথাও না, আমার মনে হয় না। ও বলছে দেখো তো, কারণ ফোন না থাকলে তো লোকেশন আমার ফোনটাও নেই।
Sangeeta, you gotta move to Connecticut. You're too useful.
Did Mama need any help?
No, I couldn't find her.
I don't even know where she is.
I think she's downstairs.
Me too. Yes, I'm gonna get my nails painted tomorrow.
Yeah? See, look, I did my nails too. Yeah.
And I'm gonna get mine a light pink.
A light pink?
Yeah.
Maybe I could do your nails. I like doing nails.
Also, my auntie does.
Yeah?
Yeah, and I'm gonna have a baby sister as well.
Yeah?
My auntie's having a baby, so she's gonna be my baby sister as well.
Nice.
Don't get to the other side. Don't get to do here because a lot of people step on this side. Don't get to do the bottom steps
Yeah?
either. Because when I'm cleaning, I also do the bottom steps.
Mm-hmm. It's easy to get to it. It's easier.
Yeah. It was very easy for me. I did back and forth until I saw no footprints.
You did it. Good. You don't want any footprints.
Nope. Taku does not like that. And Bubba told me everything you do here is for Taku.
Yeah. You do for Thakur, you do for Macharda, you do for Swamiji.
Even Jesus.
Yeah?
Yeah. My school has Jesus.
Yeah?
Yeah. And I'm going to kindergarten too.
You are? Wow. Who's your teacher? What's your teacher's name?
Miss McKay.
McKay, nice. Is she sweet?
Yeah.
Does she read you stories?
Yeah.
Nice.
My kindergarten teacher is going to be Miss McKay.
Oh, okay. So you haven't gone to kindergarten yet? You're going this year?
Yes, after summer.
Come on, Rita.